Hey everyone, thanks for another video, and today I'll be taking a look back at the Intel Celeron D 430, and we'll be testing the stock and overclocked benchmarking and gaming performance in Cinebench R15, SuperPi 1 million, and Fallout 4, GTA 5, Tomb Raider and Crysis 3, all four of which will be run at 1080p on the lowest settings. The Celeron D 430, released in Q2 of 2007, features 105 million transistors and is a single core CPU with no hyperthreading for the LGA 775 socket. It's based on the Conroe L architecture using the 65nm fabrication process and features only 512 KB of L2 cache, an 800 MHz frontside bus and no turbo boosting whatsoever. I managed to pick this up from CEX for 25 pence or 35 US cents, 28 Euro cents, which is an absolute bargain for this extremely low-end offering from Intel. Now it's time to get on to the benchmarks and games, apart from Fallout 4 and Crysis 3, because in testing, Fallout 4 would crash the moment it launches, and Crysis 3 would get to the moment after the intro cutscene with the main character Prophet, and would lock up the entire system, requiring a hard reboot by switching off the power supply itself. The rest of the system we'll be using features Windows 7, 4GB of DDR2 RAM at 800 MHz, a GTX 1080 from my personal system, and a Phanteks TC14PE to cool the Celeron. First up is Cinebench R15, a benchmark that renders a 3D scene utilising the power of your processor. The Pentium 4650 I tested previously took just over 14 minutes to complete this, but the Celeron D 430 took over 22 minutes to complete Cinebench, and at points was rendering so slowly that I honestly thought it had frozen completely. So let's speed it up a little. At its stock speed of 1.8 GHz, the Celeron D 430 managed 28 points, and when overclocked to 2.475 GHz, it managed 44 points, a 57% increase from the stock score. This was on stock voltage, so it could have gone further with faster RAM, as that was sitting at 916 MHz with the overclock and didn't want to go any further. Next up is SuperPi 1 million, a benchmark designed to calculate pi to 1 million decimal places. The Celeron we're testing today, across a total of 10 runs, managed a score of 37.656 seconds, but off camera and pre-testing it did manage a score of 36.61 seconds at stock. At the 2.475 GHz overclock, across 10 runs it managed a score of 28 seconds dead, almost 10 seconds off the stock score, which again would have been more with faster RAM allowing a higher overclock on the CPU. Let's move on to GTA 5, which will be running at 1080p on the lowest settings. GTA 5 is a game released on 17th September 2013 on the Xbox 360 and PS3, 18th of November 2014 on PS4 and Xbox One, and 14th of April 2015 on PC. The game is based on the stories of Michael, Trevor and Franklin, and is set in the fictional state of San Andreas, which in this game is based on Southern California. To say this performed pretty horribly would be an understatement. It's even worse than the Pentium 4650 I tested in the last video. At least that could manage the textures in this game. The game, as you can see, is missing most of the textures and constantly locks up. There's also a fair amount of input lag as well, admittedly not as much as the last video though. I actually gave up on running a 30-minute Fraps benchmark for this game because it locked up completely and required a complete system restart. Overall, avoid this game, it's horribly unplayable. Now it's time to move on to our last game for today, Tomb Raider, which will be running at 1080p on the lowest settings with our 2.475 GHz overclock on the Celeron. Tomb Raider is a game released on 5th of March 2013 on PS3 and Xbox 360, 23rd of January 2014 on Mac, and 27th of April 2016 for Linux. The game is based on Lara Croft and is an origin story on how she became the Tomb Raider. The problem started before I even got into the game, with the game micro-stuttering and completely locking up on the menu, which required a complete system restart. The FPS dips under 20, and it's often hard to see what is actually going on when you turn the camera quickly. Combat is also pretty much a no-go in this game due to the stuttering and locking up, and is in no way an enjoyable experience. Across a 30-minute Fraps benchmark, the minimum FPS was 0. The max was 293 FPS, although that would have been when the game was paused. The average FPS obtained though was 66, but the vast majority of the test was actually indoors, so at least that's one part of the game that isn't too bad. Overall, the Celeron D 430 is a pretty horrible CPU to use for gaming today, with constant lockups, massive stuttering, horribly low FPS, and games that won't even launch being the issues that you'll experience if you try to use this. General browsing performance isn't too bad though. A CPU like this would still be okay, and a PC built for web browsing, things like that, especially as you can buy it for such a little amount of money. I'll definitely be revisiting the CPU at some point in the future, once I get faster RAM, because I definitely want to see how far it can go in terms of overclocking.